It is Wednesday. That means it's Wednesday night lights here on the Desmond Johnson Show. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson, joined by Winston Salem Journal prep beat writer Marc Pruitt, who joins me every Wednesday during the high school football season. We are in the nitty gritty, guys. It is the middle of October, only 3 regular season weeks left. Technically for teams in the Triad. We will go through Marc's top 3 games in the Triad this upcoming Friday, October the 18th. As well, we'll take a first look at the RPI for 4A, 3A, 2A, and 1A West. There's a number of local teams that are ranked pretty high in those. We'll tell you what that means going forward. And we'll take a look at the revamped schedule. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association has changed the playoff schedule a little bit. So we'll show you how that's going to affect maybe your team and much, much more. It's the Desmond Johnson Show. Let's go.
Live with Desmond Johnson, son, the live is one. Represent NC to the fullest.
Yeah, welcome to the Carolinas. Everywhere you go, the sky is Carolina blue, the finest. Live action, feedback, the city need that. I've been #1, no cap. Here's the recap. Adrenaline is my addiction. I'm about to relapse. Step on the turf if you want and get your weed whacked. I'm going harder than a martyr on the starter end. It's the heart of man, that's a rap like a cardigan. I'm breaking records, it's 4th and inches. I count the seconds. The over-under's my roar of thunder, my secret weapon. Yeah, the game is to be told. I don't break, I break modes. Follow me on Tobacco Road.
Live with Desmond Johnson, son, the live is one. Represent NC to the fullest.
And welcome into the Desmond Johnson Show Wednesday edition. We've been going kind of light. If you've been looking for the Tuesday shows, we haven't had them the past couple of weeks. For those who don't know, I had some surgery last week. I had to peel back some of the stuff that I was doing. We will be back on a regular three shows a week schedule starting next week. We should have a show this Friday, tentatively scheduled to appear. Devils and Deacon Illustrated writer Connor O'Neill will join us to preview some ACC basketball. And Chris Lee from WRAL and Panthers Playbook should be stopping by to talk a little bit about the Carolina Panthers as they take on the Washington Commanders Sunday at 1 o'clock. Joining me right now is Marc Pruitt from the Winston Salem Journal, beat writer from there. Marc, what's happening, man? Looks like it's a beautiful October afternoon right now outside.
Nice and crisp out like it was yesterday. I had to warm up the car in the morning for the first time, taking the younger child to school. So this is football weather, though, right?
Football weather, yeah.
That's what we like. So,
like my main man Rod Funberg would say that it's crispy, like you said. It's just got a little bit of that edge on the wind outside where you start thinking about football. And we are in week 8 or 7. 8. We're in week 8 of the high school football season. And like we do every week, Marc previews his top 3 high school football games from around the state of North Carolina coming up this Friday. Actually, before we do that, because these rankings actually came out Monday, let's go through the rankings first. We haven't done it yet this season. I wanted to get deeper into the season before we did it. For people that don't know, the North Carolina football playoff rankings and basketball, well, really all of them for that matter, are done through this RPI system where it's basically the school's win percentage, your opponent's win percentage, and your opponent's win percentage. And it comes into this funky formula where it spits out a number. And from there, they decide seeding. The first, I know in 4A, I think it's the first 6 or 8 are pretty much your high seeds, your top seeds, conference champions,
right.
That are basically, they're going to be home for the better part of the playoffs. I know at least the top 2 seeds, we pretty much home the entire playoffs. And I mention that because as we go into 4A, the way it stands currently right now, as of today, this came out October 14th, so this came out on Monday. If we take a quick look here at the standings, you can see Grimsley is currently listed as the top team in the 4A West region, meaning that if the season ended today, Grimsley would have home field advantage throughout the playoffs to the state championship round. Defending 4A champion Weddington is second. East Forsyth coming in at 7-0 after dismantling Parkland last Friday. Actually dropped a spot. They were second last week, but they dropped to third. Watauga is fourth. You can notice they're only 5-0. They are 2 weeks back in terms of games needing to be played. We'll get to that in a minute. Northern Guilford is fifth at 7-0. Northwest Guilford is sixth at 5-2. Then you have Asheville, who clearly they've only played 3 games. Of course, we know what's going on up in Western North Carolina. We'll get to how they're going to amend that here in just a bit. Mount Tabor sitting at number 8 at 5-2. You got Mallard Creek at 6-1 and West Forsyth at number 10. I mentioned this to start off because the past 2 seasons, we've seen perennial powers Grimsley and East Forsyth be ranked really high in RPI. Matter of fact, 2022, East Forsyth was number 1 in the state the entire year in RPI until they got to a soft spot in their schedule. They played a Parkland team and a Reynolds team. I think neither team had won at that point, and they beat them like 120-7 or whatever it was between the 2 games. But because of their RPIs, East dropped from 1 to like 6 or something like that in this poll. I mention that because I'm noticing with Grimsley ranked number 1 right now, Mark, it looks like it sets up where they can potentially stay there because Northern Guilford is still undefeated and ranked 5th RPI. And that's Grimsley's last game of the year in like 3 weeks, which we'll have here on Tobacco Road. That should, honestly, that game will probably determine the top seed in 4A West, because if Northern Guilford beats Grimsley in that game, I imagine they would catapult up considerably up the rankings as well.
Yeah, and I think that goes to show too the strength of both of those conferences. The CPC and the Metro 4A have 3 teams in the top 10 for the West region, and it's looking like it might kind of set up the same for East this year. Beating Parkland last week, they played Reynolds Friday night. Reynolds is a much improved team, won their last 2 games, but I don't know that they have the horses. I think it's going to be another kind of runaway win for East. But I don't think it's going to do any favors for them in the RPI unless they count that strength of schedule.
Reagan,
I don't know, where is Reagan? I can't see.
They're at 15. They're actually at 15 at 4-3, right there at the very bottom.
And I think despite all the lumps that Reagan has taken the last several weeks and injuries, they've been injury riddled because they had some key wins early in the season with Marvin Ridge and Mooresville. Playing in the CPC is going to give them a leg up. I think they probably got to pick up another win or 2 to kind of get comfortably in for the playoffs. But that strong RPI for a Reagan team that's clearly kind of having the down second part of their season because of a lot of injuries and things. So
you mentioned Reagan. They're 4-3. Their 3 losses are to Grimsley, East Forsyth, and West Forsyth. 3 teams that are ranked above them in this RPI.
Exactly.
So it's kind of nuts. Similar to Mount Tabor sitting at 8. They're 5-2. Their 2 losses are to Grimsley and East Forsyth.
Right.
So it's normally the CPC at the bottom, it's kind of softer down there at the bottom, but they are a little bit stronger this year. And then East, you said similar situation. East Forsyth finishes the season hosting West Forsyth in that East versus West battle. So that might determine who's the 2nd or 3rd seed in 4A. I wanted to bounce around real quick to the other ones, just because we do have some local teams that are ranked in these, and I wanted to hop to them real quick if I could just pop over. But
sure.
Have you got a chance to see Grimsley up in person yet? I know you normally are carrying County.
I saw him first game. I saw him play Tabor first game of the season, and they looked really, really impressive. That's the game Mitchell Summers ran for 220 some yards and 5 touchdowns and ran over Jadon Blair. And it was a completely different Grimsley team from what I remember seeing last year when they had the weapons outside with Terrell and the other kid's name is
Anderson. Anderson and the other kid
is Alex.
Alex Taylor. Yeah, Alex Taylor.
Alex. So they had Faison, Brandon. They had the 2 receivers, and they had Mitchell last summer, and they had a great defense despite Bryce Davis getting hurt. I guess 2nd or 3rd game of the season. But seeing them this year, they're more run-oriented. They rely on their defense a lot. And they do have a couple of good receivers. Caden Cato is one. They got a really good tight end prospect who's a big young man. So I think Grimsley would be very deserving of that 1 seed. Weddington, I saw play West Forsyth. They've got a lot of weapons. And I know they've had some injuries, too. I think their top running back got hurt earlier in the year, and I don't think he's coming back this season. Weddington has a great defense. Thomas Davis Jr. kind of leads that group, former Carolina Panthers stud's son, and he's just as healthy as Mr. Davis was. He's got a lot of offers for D1 schools. And, of course, East, I think, would be very deserving of a 1 seed, too. Hopefully playing in the CPC will elevate that, but I don't think you could argue with either. I don't think anybody would argue with those 3 teams kind of being those top 3 in the West, whatever order it finishes up with.
I'd throw Huff in there too. I know Huff is
good. Yeah, they're sneaky good. And they've had a very consistent program over the years. I know they knocked East out of the playoffs 2 years in a row in the 3rd or 4th round. Got a new coach. It's his second year there now, but they are also kind of the overlooked team in Charlotte in some regards, if that makes any sense. But yeah, they're right up there.
Looking at 3A West, and we're staying on the West because we're on that side. It would be too confusing if we went through the whole thing right now for the East as well. But looking at 3A West, you got South Point at number 1. The first local team you get to is actually Dudley, but they're all the way down at number 12. And a lot of that has to do with their strength of schedule and their win percentage, because looking at it here, they're 7-0, but their opponent's win percentage is like 38%. So it's like it's really dragging them down. So for Dudley Panther fans that are out there wondering why Dudley's ranked so low, even though they're 7-0 and kind of beating the brakes off of everybody, that's kind of why. And it makes them.
That's the league they play in. And
yeah,
they would still get either they'd still be in the top seed for home. They would probably get the lowest top seed, which would be 6 or 8. That's left after everything else gets done, because they're going to be a conference champion. They're not going to knock them down because of that. So
that's the first one you see there in 3A from this area. 2A, the normal bullies on the block, Reidsville, are ranked number 1 in RPI, 7-0 right now with 3 games to go. Some other local, West Stokes is sitting at 5th at 6-2. Walkertown is sitting at 6 at 6-1. Shout out to head coach Trip Honeycutt, his first season with the Wolfpack. I promise, I told him a month ago I was going to get him on here, but we've never been able to line up our calendars. I'm going to try to see if I can get him next week, because I think Reidsville and Walkertown play each other here very soon.
They play Friday night. That's one of my games this week.
Okay. So we'll hold on that one there for
teaser,
just a second. So Reidsville and Walkertown, that one's going to have a lot to say for seeding in 2A. Some other local teams that are in there include Salisbury at 7-1, North Surrey at 12, East Surrey at 16, Surrey Central at 17, and then you get down towards the middle of the pack there. But yeah, that Reidsville, let's just start right there then before I go over to, let me just do 1A real quick. And then in 1A, Mount Airy is the perennial power there, 8-0. They are number 1 right now in RPI. They'd have home field advantage if the season ended today. East Wilkes is in there at 7th. Bishop McGinnis is sitting at 10th at 5-2 here in Kernersville. So shout out to Bishop McGinnis. And looks like I don't see any other. Andrews isn't 1A. Is that High Point Andrews at 18?
That's probably Andrews in the mountains. That's probably the
okay. That's what I thought. Okay. Yeah. So that's the standings there. Let's go back. So Marc's top 3 games for this week, starting off here with that big one, Walkertown and Reidsville you mentioned there. Tell us a little bit about that one.
So this will in likelihood, if Reidsville wins, they will be the Mid-State 2A conference champion. They beat West Stokes last week. West Stokes actually had a lead on them in the third quarter of that game at Reidsville. And Reidsville Deontay Neal just crushed the game. I think he had 6 total touchdowns, 4 passing, 2 return. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. He ran for 111 yards, threw for 350 or something like that. The kid's just a dynamic athlete. He was the best. Everybody talks about Kendra Harrison and Janiah Sharp. Deontay, I think, makes that engine run. He makes that basketball team engine run when he's on the floor as the point guard for them. But he's also the point guard of the football team now as the quarterback. It's his first season as the quarterback, and he's really responded. Tripp has Walkertown playing great. They beat Salisbury. I know you mentioned them in the RPI. They beat Salisbury earlier this year, and I think that's the game that really kind of made everybody take notice. I think most coaches around here know what Tripp is capable of. He went in his first head coaching job at South Davidson, went 4-6 both years, but made the playoffs. And that's the first time South Davidson has made the playoffs in years, like a decade, I think, is what I remember him telling me. So he knows what he's doing. He knows how to coach those teams up. Got 2 great weapons in Cam Kelly, a running back who leads for Scythe County in rushing yards. He's got like 1,200 rushing yards already this season. Mike Curry is a dynamic receiver and return guy. Also plays cornerback some for him. So they've got the weapons. The game is at Walkertown. And that's going to be a big one, I think, Friday night. And they definitely determine the conference champion. Walkertown still has to play West Stokes to those are the 3 best teams in that league. So it'll help. Obviously, it would be probably a monumental upset for Walkertown to win that one.
Oh, yeah.
However, crazier things have happened. We saw Reynolds beat Mount Tabor last year in the regular season too. So but yeah, I think it's great for that community in Walkertown. Reedsville always has the strong community support, so that should be a fun one on Friday night.
That sounds like a huge matchup. Not a lot of teams go up to Reedsville and come away with a victory over the past 30, 40 years or whatever it may be. But Coach Honeycutt and company are going to go up that way and try to pull a victory for Walkertown. That might be one of the biggest wins in Walkertown in history if they pull that off on Friday. And I'm sitting here thinking about it. So we'll keep an eye on
would
that.
Definitely be the biggest in Walkertown. I think that's definitely a calling card win right there if they can pull that off.
Absolutely. That would be huge for Walkertown. So we'll keep an eye on Reedsville versus Walkertown Friday night. Give us game number 2, Marc Pruitt's top 3 games in the Triad this week.
I'm intrigued by this one. I don't know why, but Reynolds has a lot of momentum right now. They've won 2 straight conference games for the first time, and I don't know how long they are going to be taking on East Forsyth Friday night. East Forsyth, as we all know, as you know, you see them every week. They are loaded. They got so many weapons. Reynolds has some guys that can play. They have some dudes: Joe Crawley, Mac Murphy, quarterback Tommy Elrod. They do have pieces. Coach Joe Davidiak really has their energy level up. I really admire that guy's moxie. He's brought a new enthusiasm to that program. I think the kids are buying into it. Coming off 2 wins, playing the best team, the perennial best team in this league, for a decade running now. It's a tall task, but hey, crazier things have happened. Reynolds beat Mount Tabor last year in the regular season.
True.
So see what that one holds. I mean, I expect that East Forsyth will win, but it's intriguing to me because Reynolds has this momentum now. They've won 4 games already this year, and I think they combined to win 4 the last 2 years. So,
right, yeah. I had Coach Davidiak on when he first got the job. He literally looks like he's 21. I think he's the youngest coach in the entire CPC by far. And to see his enthusiasm and turning this thing around with Reynolds has a lot. Reynolds fans, y'all have a lot to look forward to going forward. They're, of course, they're finally building you guys a home stadium in Haynes Park. Much overdue. Never understood the dynamic of them playing at Deaton Thompson because it's literally nowhere near the campus of RJ Reynolds. It's literally across town. So like every home game they have, they're at a disadvantage really. They share it with Parkland, but Parkland's at least right up the street from Deaton Thompson. Like it makes sense. But for Reynolds to have to play their home games there, I always felt like that was a detriment to Reynolds to have to do that. So for them to build one literally right behind the gym, they're starting to build right there. They broke ground. They're doing, I don't know when it's expected to open. Maybe by next year. Maybe if they're hoping
for football. Definitely hoping for fall.
That would be fun to go over there and do a football game at Reynolds for the first.
Yeah, I plan to be there the very first home game. I plan to be there.
Yeah, I think I might have to make some plans to make that happen.
But it also beats. I don't know, maybe it doesn't. But when I was in school at Reynolds back in the 1980s, we played our home games at Bowman Gray, as did Parkland. So
now that it's a little bit closer. No, it's actually further away, but that actually makes more sense, I guess, because it's bigger.
Yeah.
And,
I hope maybe one day they'll get to building Parkland the stadium if they can figure out where they could put one for Parkland.
That's the problem for Parkland. And
everybody would have one.
Just tear down Deaton Thompson, to be honest, and rebuild it. Like the spot there is not bad for Parkland to play their home games. It's literally right up the street from there. But
every other stadium that kind of was like Deaton Thompson and Mount Tabor and Glenn had similar home side bleachers at least. That Deaton Thompson did with the concrete blocks up the way. So they've replaced those at both schools. So maybe something can be done for Deaton Thompson to kind of give it a little update that it needs.
When I was at school at East, I graduated in 96. They had the concrete bleachers on the home side too, but they weren't as big. They sloped up the hill as opposed to going like straight up vertical like the ways Deaton Thompson does. Speaking on this East Forsyth team, I am the voice of the Eagles. Shout out to Coach Willard and Fox 8 who came out to the Nest on Tuesday night to tape a segment on the show. The Nest is the longest running high school football coaches show in the Triad. As far as we can tell, we're in season 6 right now. And they did a feature story on East Forsyth and Coach Willard and myself and Tobacco Road and all this stuff. And it's supposed to air on Thursday on Fox 8. So for those interested in watching that, I believe they told us it'll be on social media as well. So we'll try to get the digital clips and get that out for everybody to see. But this East team is coming. Offensively, I think they're the top offense in the state. I think they're averaging like 50 points per game, over 500 yards offensively. Haven't really seen a crack in their armor offensively. Even the Mount Tabor game, it still felt like it wasn't so much they had complete control, but it didn't feel like they had no control. Like they still could kind of do some things that they wanted to do. They just had to work harder for it. And
I think
it took
when they got up,
in.
yeah, they got up. I think it was 28-13 early in the third quarter, and it looked like they were about to put them away. And I remember talking to Coach Willard after the game, and he said we were an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty from putting it away in the third quarter because I think they were in position to drive or score another touchdown, and really just kind of take the wind out of Tabor's sails. And I think that penalty prevented them from getting a first down. Then Tabor took over from there and started running it down their throat and made it interesting there in the fourth quarter. So
that was something that I didn't expect to see in that Tabor East Forsyth game was Tabor's ability to run the football on East Forsyth, and they were doing it on the edges. Like they would bounce out to the edge and get to the sideline and go because in the middle for East they've got Chris Kirby, Brian Godfrey, and Omarion Hayes, and you're literally talking about 870 pounds of just man like in the middle of that line. So it's really hard. And I see teams all the time just trying to run up the middle on East defense, and it's like running into a brick wall like 20 times. So Tabor kind of figured out some stuff that night. Again, you got to have the players to do it. You can't just be anybody and try to get to the edge because they've got guys like Elijah Edwards and Nate Stewart and Robbie Whitney that are playing all conference ball right now. East is humming right now. I feel like if they can get home field again, I think that they didn't say it verbally to me coaching wise, but you can kind of see it when you're out there at practice. And Willard did say this at one point, beginning of the year. They saw some of the stuff from that loss to Independence last year, early on in the playoffs. East is used to playing to at least Thanksgiving. Like they're used to practicing on Thanksgiving morning. It's like a tradition over there to eat McDonald's biscuits on Thanksgiving and everything else. And they didn't get there last year. So it's kind of an eye-opener for them. And if you look at their offense and defensive lines, they went out and tried to make sure that they were Charlotte big, the way I call it. Like they are Charlotte big on offense and defense. They're not getting pushed around. They are large. They might be the largest offensive line in the Triad, and it shows.
Definitely, they're bigger than West's offensive line, I think.
But not saying something because West's offensive line is usually a bunch of hogs over there. Like,
And I remember we talked about this at the beginning of the year. I don't know if both of us were out there that same. I know we ran into each other at one of the early practices, but I remember Willard telling me the first time I was out there when I remarked to him, "You guys are big," and he said, "This is the biggest we've ever been," and we go 8 or 9 deep, and that just I was floored by that.
Yeah, they've got like sophomores that are weighing like 315 sitting on the sideline that aren't even getting in the game yet. That are just waiting their turn. So they've gone out consciously for. In my mind, they built this team. They didn't build it to win the CPC. They built it for November. Like they literally built it for. And every kid, when they get on the nest and they ask them, when Rod asks them, "What's the one word you want to describe this team as?" They say state champs or champs or whatever. Like their goal is state championship. So
that lost Independence last year really sticks in their craw. They've all
it was all self-inflicted. It was all self-inflicted.
Any of the players that I've talked to in my time out there at games, they'll talk about it. They'll say, that was a very disappointing loss and that shouldn't have happened, and we're trying to fix that this year. So
I think we may be, hopefully, I've wanted it for the past 2 years. Really, I've wanted it since 2019, but I hope we're inevitably heading towards a Grimsley East Forsyth Western Regional Final. Wouldn't
that be fun?
Whether it's in Greensboro, whether it's in K Vegas. The last time they haven't seen each other since 2019. Matter of fact, I think the last time Grimsley lost at home was to East Forsyth in 2019. They've not lost since, and that was two games straight in that year. I think same score, 21-20, both times. In the regular season, they played them early, and then they played them in the Western Regional 4A final. East Forsyth stopped. Grimsley went for a 2-point conversion to win the game at the end at the goal line. East stopped it and won the game, went to the state championship, and then beat Cardinal Gibbons to go back-to-back. So maybe we get East Forsyth Grimsley. That's kind of what the Triad's looking at. It's kind of what they want. So we'll see what happens there. Give us your third game for this week coming up here. You already got Walkertown and Reedsville, and you got East Forsyth and Reynolds. 2 good ones there.
Let's stay in the CPC and go with a big rivalry game coming across the Yadkin River. Davie County's coming into Clemens to play West Forsyth. I don't know really what to make of Davie. I know we talked about this a little bit Monday night at Coach Wallace's show. They're struggling right now, trying to find themselves. They're young. It took 2 games for them to figure out their quarterback situation, and they put a freshman in, DeAndre Nance, who threw for, I think it was a school record, 450 yards and 5 touchdowns in his first game. They have a great receiver, Ethan Driver, who led the conference in catches, touchdown passes, and he tied with Josh Austin for touchdown receptions last year, but he led the conference in receptions and yards. And he's still getting the ball this year. I want to say he's second. He's behind JP right now in total yards. But they got a great linebacker in Elijah Chafin. He's a sophomore. He's a big young man, and I think he had 24 tackles against Reagan 2 weeks ago in the loss to Reagan. But Dave's just young, and West. It's homecoming week. There's a lot of emotions out there. Everybody's going to be riding that homecoming high come Friday night. It was a great game last year at Davie, where I think I saw the most extraordinary running performances I've ever seen at a high school football game. Kane and Chaplin went for 365. The Davie running back went for 265. And that was a bad night, you know.
Oh, my God.
And West ended up winning, I think, by 2 touchdowns. But it was a high-scoring game. Just went back and forth. And it was just Markel Summers and Keenan Chaplin show that night. And it's a little different now. Davie's running back is a sophomore. West kind of is found a new little weapon in Darrell Page, who's normally a wide receiver, but Coach Wallace is getting him some more touches now as a running back. He and CJ Blevins have a good little thing going. The last 2 weeks, I think they've gone for 250 plus combined. And then Riley Horton can throw it and he can run it, and it gives them that third option out of the backfield if he needs to, pull that ball in and take off down the field. So West has got it going. The defense has been playing really well. 2 shutouts in the last 2 wins. So curious to see how that one shapes out for Friday.
And we actually will have that one. I just realized I was looking at our slate of games. It's our last big Friday of the season. This Friday we've got myself and Hot Rod Funderburk will be at Deaton Thompson calling East Forsyth versus Reynolds. Chase Williams and Coach James Willamie will be doing the WCOG game of the week. That's Grimsley hosting Southwest Guilford. So those two clash in a Metro 4A matchup. Mike Fanning will have Glenn versus Mount Tabor over at the Water Tower. So that's listed as the WTOB game of the week, but that may be flexed to East Forsyth Reynolds. I haven't decided yet. And then JP Monday will actually be calling West Forsyth versus Davie out in the Village. So we've got 4 of those games. 2 of the 3 that you mentioned we'll have on Tobacco Road Sports Radio on a variety of different platforms this Friday. So big Friday, October the 18th. Of course, Tobacco Road's your leader for high school football coverage and action. I'm excited, man. We only got 2 weeks left to go, and I'm sitting here. I'm not supposed to peep ahead, but I'm looking forward. And like next week is like rivalry week. We've got East Forsyth and Glenn battle for the K Vegas Cup. That's the TOB game of the week. That's at Glenn, if I'm not mistaken. So me and Rod will be calling that one. Grimsley versus Page. There's always a perennial rivalry game. Page trying to rebound. Grimsley's going to be doing Grimsley things. That's Chase and Coach Willamie. That's the COG game of the week next week. And Southwest Guilford and Ragsdale, Max Williams and Colin will be on that call on Friday. And then we finish up the season with 2 huge games with playoff implications probably at this point. Friday, November the 1st, East Forsyth hosting West Forsyth. The CPC may be in play for that one, depending on what happens in the next 2 weeks. That's the TOB game of the week. And then Grimsley, Northern Guilford, Chase and Coach Willamie will be on that one for the COG game of the week. That might be a battle of 2 undefeated teams, winner take all in the Metro. Before we get out of here, though, I did want to show everyone the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, due to what happened up in Western North Carolina with Hurricane Helene, had to alter the playoff structure here, and it will affect teams here in the area. Let me make it a little larger here so we can see it. So they changed some stuff around where they basically added another 2 weeks to the schedule here. So if we look at this, the conference reporting deadline is 11:59 p.m. on November the 9th. The seeding will be November 10th. Shout out to my guy, Joe Serrera, because that's usually where he kind of shined. Like he kind of could figure out what's going to be what and who's going to be where. Drew Dole over at East Forsyth is really, really good. The baseball coach at RPI and figuring out the seeding. So he usually gives me seeding like the night before or that Friday. So when we go do East and West, he'll have it already mapped out. Like this is what's going to happen if they win, if they lose or whatever. And he's been pretty spot on the past 3 years. So first round is now going to start November the 15th. It was supposed to start November the 1st. So they backed it out 2 weeks, and that's to allow some of the teams in the West to catch up with some games. And if I'm not mistaken, Mark, I thought I saw some adaptations to the rule where they have to have 3 days in between games or something like that.
Yeah, so that means basically they're allowing these teams out West, especially, to make up 2 games in a week. Hopefully, is the case for some of them. I don't know that that's going to be the case if they can all do it, because a lot of them are probably going to have to play elsewhere at a different stadium. So I think that brings up that complication. And I think the other one was if they add a game that day before the seedings come out, they can't enter in max preps because it will affect the seeding. So I don't know if some teams around here might want to set up some kind of scrimmage just to stay fresh, since it'll basically be an open week for them.
Yeah,
I doubt that would be the case. I think everybody would probably, around here at least, take that week off. Maybe just hit practices a little bit heavier.
It's like another bye.
Anybody hurt, right?
Yeah,
right. But there's some flexibility there. I think if coaches kind of don't want to take that break the first week, they can have a little scrimmage game or something set up. But they just can't. It can't be part of their record, and it can't be part of their RPI. So they don't. Basically, it'd be an unofficial game that would not be entered into max preps.
I don't know if, like, we're speaking on like East Forsyth and Grimsley, I think they would just take the bye, to be honest. I think
I really do.
I
just think it does offer that flexibility. Some coaches would rather keep playing. I'm guessing at that time of the year, since now they've got it, they're going to take advantage of not having to play.
Yeah, and that way they don't have to, because both of those teams, again, are going to be in games the last week of the season where they can't afford to rest players. They're going to have conferences and seeding on the line, maybe top seeding at that in the West 4A. So now, instead of it being, usually it's around December 5th, December 6th is usually when the state championship is for all classifications for football. Because of them pushing it down a couple of weeks in the calendar, that's been pushed down. The first round will start November 15th. We'll get all the way to regionals December 13th. State championship games will start December the 20th and the 21st at Keenan Stadium and at the University of North Carolina, and Carter Finley at NC State, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they went back to Duke. They were there a couple years ago. Something happened with private schools where they used to do Duke and Wake Forest.
Used to have 4 sites, but that was when they had 8 championship games.
Yeah, right. And now maybe they go back to that next year when they split this out again to 8 classifications.
May have to.
Yeah. So we got all that there. That's going to do it for us for today, Wednesday, October the 16th. Again, we should be back with a new episode Friday, tentatively scheduled to appear. Connor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated and Deacon Illustrated will stop by to start our ACC Big Four basketball previews. We'll have that. WRL's Chris Lee will stop by, also host of Panthers Playbook. We'll talk about the Panthers versus Commanders this upcoming Sunday. It's a 4:00 kickoff on CBS, and much, much more. Make sure you listen to these games across our all of our streams on tobaccoroadsportsradio.com starting this Friday at 7 p.m. We will see you on Friday.